We just have to demonstrate that he will not take power if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again.
America is in uncharted territory. We are angrier and more deeply divided than we've ever been at any point in our history.
Here it comes.
Since the Civil War. I'm running for Attorney General because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
Yes!
So how did that happen that we actually may get justice in that case?
A little bit.
Well, I mean, look.
Wasn't it the judge that threw out the sweetheart deal?
House Republicans finally moving forward to do something about these state-level prosecutions. Tish James in New York, Alvin Bragg with his criminal prosecution, Fani Willis, and there will be more, no doubt about it. They have a plan, which would be to remove the cases from the state, bring them up to federal court, so we don't have as rigged jurisdictions as we've got now. We're going to take a look at the bill. It's a short one, along with this montage from the Democrats showing how they've orchestrated all of these political lawfare onslaughts before we see what's happening in Congress. Because remember, in the Bragg prosecution, they made the argument that Trump had a conspiracy to violate federal election law and so on and so forth, but then they didn't actually charge him with federal election law violations because the feds investigated it and declined, and they didn't define what the object or the predicate offense was at all, so the jurors could just kind of make it up. Well, the FEC expert was testifying in Congress, giving us some real clarity on why this was such a rigged verdict. But the GOP were the people that flagged this for us. This is the new bill that Congress is shoving through, and it made its way out of committee today. You see, the GOP wrote this. Did you know Manhattan District Judge Juan Mercan's decisions, guided by political bias, unfairly prejudiced the outcome of the trial, and they ensured Trump did not get a fair trial. Just before the trial, Mercan placed gag orders on Trump, which we covered, and they prohibited him from engaging in political speech. Now, during the trial, Mercan routinely allowed inadmissible evidence into the record against Trump, prevented Trump from introducing key evidence, and at the end of the trial, Mercan also refused to provide the juries with a written copy of the 55 pages of confusing jury instructions. And so now, this is a prime example of why our committee has passed H.R. 2553, the No More Political Prosecutions Act, to allow a former president to remove a state trial to federal court, so that the Bragg case would have been moved up, and the Fani case would see the same fate. Here is what the bill looks like, very short. You can see it's H.R. 2553, title to amend Title 28, saying this has been introduced by a bunch of people, you know, Van Drew, Moore, Fitzgerald, Niels, Biggs, Hageman, Boebert, Miller, Johnson, and Donalds. Byron Donalds also submitting this one. So here's what it says. The bill is to amend Title 28 U.S. Code to authorize removal of an action. When we take something from a state court to a federal court, we call it removing it from state court into federal court. So if you're prosecuting a president, a vice president, former vice president, that's what happens. So very simple. It says here, it's all it's going to do. In general, Section 1442A is amended in paragraph 3 by striking the semicolon and inserting this by adding at the end the following: the president or vice president or a former president or vice president. So it's just amending the removal statutes of the legal procedure. The amendment made by the subsections shall apply to civil actions or criminal prosecutions pending on the date of the enactment, pending on the date. Yeah, so it would apply to Trump if this passed today, or commenced on or after such date. So as long as the Trump cases are open, this would apply. So if it's closed, you can no longer remove them. So let's say this passes, or let's say even this gets carried over into the next Congress. So we have the 2024 elections, Trump wins, Congress is kept by the Republicans, maybe they win the Senate back, something happens, then they could pass this. And if the Fani trial is still ongoing, then they would be able to remove that one into federal court. That would expand the juror pool from the Fulton County up into the entire state of Georgia, which might even vote for Trump this year. I think he's up dramatically in the polls there by 5-6 points. So that would be good. I think it's a smart strategy for the Republicans to be pursuing this, and we'll see if they ultimately have the votes to push it through. But why is this necessary? Well, this was a nice montage summarizing all of the political attacks that this one also came out from the House Judiciary GOP. This is why they're releasing this, because of this never-ending onslaught of Democrat lawfare.
We just have to demonstrate that he will not take power if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election,
and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel.
Illegally.
Today, I signed an order appointing Jack
Illegally.
Smith to serve as
Unconstitutionally.
special counsel.
Yes, he
Also, the
did.
lowest learner, he was giving advice to perhaps go after conservative groups for IRS matters.
And so, what I get out of that is I think he's been overzealous in some of these low-profile cases. He's willing to stretch the law. John Roberts called it a boundless interpretation that would catch up politicians in their ordinary acts that they do for people. And I think it just says maybe a lack of judgment. And that's the concern that I get out of my case and the others.
The White House fired back after defense attorney Ashley Merchant testified yesterday about
Shout
a
out
meeting
to Ashley.
between District Attorney Fani Willis and Vice President Kamala Harris. Merchant cited evidence that Willis visited the White House in February of 2023. That's just months before a grand jury in Georgia indicted President Trump in the state's election interference case.
America is an uncharted territory. We are angrier and more deeply divided than we've ever been at any point in our history.
Here it comes.
Since the Civil War. I'm running for Attorney
Here it
General
comes.
because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
Yes!
When our fundamental rights are at stake.
Face,
but decided
Twitch,
to pursue
Tish.
this one. And when he did, an interesting attorney came on board late in this whole process. Matthew Colangelo, tell us why we should know about Colangelo's role in all of this.
Because he held the number 3 spot at DOJ, which is maybe the most coveted spot at the Department of Justice outside of Attorney General itself, because typically that job is a straight path to becoming a corporate bigwig, making a lot of money. It's considered very elite. So for him to step down from that, to go work for a local prosecutor in New York on this case, it says something. I think it says that he's got to be a pretty true believer, and this is personal, if he wants to get involved in this.
I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. I was the chief deputy in the Attorney General's office. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times for the Muslim travel ban, for family separation at the border, for shenanigans with the census. So I know how to litigate with him. I also led the team that did the Trump Foundation case. So I'm ready to go wherever the facts take me and to inherit that case. And I think, it'd be hard to argue with the fact that that'd be the most high profile case. And I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do. So I've seen a pattern of lawlessness over 20 years. And so I'm inclined to believe all I see in the public domain and believe that there's a path forward there to make a case.
Good ad. Of course, that is what we're witnessing. We've been covering all of those prosecutions. Face Twitch Tish spasming out over her TDS. Hopefully she's got something for that now. But it's never ending. They're running for office. They get elected to deliver on their campaign promises, and they do. And Colangelo left one of the most prestigious positions on the whole planet to go work for Bragg to be a part of it. Why is that? Well, we know why. Because he's part of a conspiracy, a political operation to take out Trump. Someone else who's a part of that is this guy called Norm Eisen. And he was getting questioned pretty good here by this fella. The House Judiciary Committee is sharing this video, watching Representative Tiffany lace into Norm Eisen. Norm Eisen, many people call a conspirator of anti-Trump operations, including the first impeachment against Trump, and a lot of other onslaughts, like the creation of Michael Cohen to create other lies against Trump. So here is this exchange from testimony in Congress today.
Sure, you answered the ranking member, I think, and I want to make sure I heard it correctly, that you said President Trump's interference in the 2016 election.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Talking about the Bragg
interfered
case.
in the 2016 election.
Yes, sir.
And real quickly, how so?
The jury unanimously found in the Manhattan case that former President Trump had committed 34 felony violations of document falsification.
You weren't referring to anything else.
No, that's not true. That's disinformation, sir. In order to find that, they were charged with election interference. The underlying crime that made that a felony, not a misdemeanor, was election interference. Same pattern as 2020.
So it's all about election interference in 2016 also, Mrs. Foley. So we heard from the gentleman that's to your right that he said that the DOJ should be viewed as above reproach because, look, they prosecuted the president's son. A year ago, weren't they cutting the sweetheart deal? Do you recall the details of that?
It was not prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, they were
agreement,
basically just going to let him walk for all of them. They already allowed statutes of limitations to expire on multiple more serious felonies.
So how did that happen that we actually may get justice in that case?
A little
bit. I mean, look.
Wasn't it the judge that threw out the sweetheart deal?
Yeah, I mean, you had a judge in Delaware that threw out the sweetheart deal.
Biden threw it out.
I guess there was egg on the Biden administration's face, so they felt like they had to do something.
Yeah,
so they pursued these current charges, the gun charges and the tax charges.
Which were also the rigged charges.
But, I mean, did they reach the right result? I assume so. I didn't follow that trial very much. I think there'll be an interesting question as to whether the president commutes the his son's sentence. So we'll see.
So also the gentleman next to you referred to under questioning, he said this jury was scrupulously fair. It was outstanding. There was nothing unusual. Care to comment on that?
Well, again, I mean,
you could start with
I'm not
unusual.
blaming the jury here. I think the poison came from the behavior of the prosecutors hiding the ball, and then Judge Merchan giving sort of a cafeteria-style approach where non-unanimity was allowed on the
I like
underlying
that. Yeah, we said buffet.
means by which the New York election
Or
law
pick a
was
card, any
violated.
card.
I
Pick
think
a crime,
those are
any
clear
crime.
due process violations. So it's not the jury's fault. They just had, junk to work with, so to speak. I was going to use
They
another
had a cafeteria
word, but,
tray.
I probably should.
Yeah, some of that, some of
It's
that.
almost
some of
enough
that.
to shock the conscience, huh?
It's almost enough. Yeah, it shocks mine. I don't know about yours, but...
I believe the judge contributed to President Biden, the judge
Yeah,
in
you're
this
not wrong.
case.
No, $35.
Is that common
Two
for a
separate
case that
payments.
has a real nexus that the judge would contribute and then not recuse?
I've never seen a case like that. I mean, usually a lawyer feels pretty confident if he finds out that the judge has overtly, expressed preference for one party or another. And political contributions to the Biden administration would seem to fit that bill. Given the political overtones of this case, right, this was not an ordinary state prosecution. This was a state prosecution that, if successful, even though it had been turned down at every other level to even proceed as a prosecution,
That's right.
if it proved
By
successful,
Manhattan.
it would basically interfere with the 2024 presidential
Exactly.
election. And
By design.
possibly that interference could not be remedied, could not be rectified until after the election. So it's slam dunk 2024 election interference.
Happening right now.
It's almost reminiscent of Jack Smith and Governor McDonnell in Virginia, isn't it?
When he was
Right.
running.
And he got his, handed to him
Yeah.
by the Supreme Court on that one.
I want to get a question into Attorney General Bailey here. Talk about the overall chilling effect in regards to this. In fact, I believe it was Governor Hochul, after this charge happened, went on media in New York and said, hey, don't worry, we're not coming after the rest of you business people. This is just Donald Trump. Talk about the impact of something like this for the long run in the rule of law.
The Constitution is our national identity. Those rights codified therein come from God, not man, and the document is intended to protect us from the government. And yet what we see time and time again is the government being weaponized against individuals. It's President Trump today. Who will it be tomorrow? And that's the problem. I think that when you look at the due process issues contained in the charging document, ultimately in the jury instructions, you look at the inchoate nature of the offenses with these ill-defined levels of attenuation. It's as if invisible links of chain are necessary to connect the facts to criminal liability.
Whatever they want.
And it causes the jury to turn into a roving commission, free to pursue whatever facts they want to attach liability as they please. And the issue there is it undermines the rule of law for the rest of us. Who can have confidence that we know what is and isn't illegal behavior when the court and the prosecutor impanel a roving commission to attack a political opponent?
Yeah, right on. Amen. Good stuff from those witnesses, except that first guy, Norm, who is just a strange fella. But elsewhere was this testimony from this individual. FEC Commissioner was testifying right next door in between the two of them. And we'll listen to his opening statement because this guy is going to explain why this whole 2016 election interference narrative is insane. FEC already looked into it. They declined. And Bragg tried to create a federal crime to make it an object offense of a misdemeanor, to turn a misdemeanor into a felony, even though it was a non-charged offense.
It's an honor to appear before you today to discuss the critical issue of jurisdictional overreach in the prosecution of federal campaign finance law, specifically regarding the actions of Alvin Bragg, the district attorney for Manhattan, in his prosecution of former President Donald Trump. No less critical, I want to highlight the inaction by the Department of Justice to defend federal jurisdiction in this case. The Federal Election Campaign Act serves as the bedrock for regulating money in our elections. It delineates the authorities responsible for enforcing these rules, vesting exclusive jurisdiction in the Federal Election Commission and the Department of Justice. This statutory framework is designed to ensure a uniform application of campaign finance laws nationwide, preventing the creation of fragmented enforcement landscape and leveraging the expertise and resources of federal agencies. District Attorney Alvin Bragg's decision to pursue charges against former President Trump for alleged violations of federal campaign finance laws marks a significant deviation from this established legal framework. By doing so, Bragg has effectively usurped the jurisdiction that this Congress has explicitly reserved for federal authorities.
Right, it's the Fed.
This overreach sets a troubling precedent for the politicization
They
of
wanted
legal
it.
proceedings at the state level.
They couldn't do it.
The
so they let
danger
him.
here lies in the disparate enforcement standards that torture well-established federal law processes. As an example, the state judge in New York misinterpreted federal criminal mental intent standards and gave the jury an instruction which read willfully contributing campaign contributions, but the statutory mental intent found in the Federal Election Campaign Act is knowing and willful. Now, imagine 50 states states enacting the crime of campaigning by unlawful means, and 1,000 different state and local prosecutors prosecuting presidents, former presidents, presidential candidates, and any number of House and Senate candidates under varying interpretations of FECA by bootstrapping those laws through their state's unlawful means criminal code.
Right.
It is also disturbing in this
Hopefully some
case what
Republicans
hasn't
do it.
happened over at the Department of Justice. Given the clear precedent established by the U.S. Supreme Court regarding the prohibition of state officers prosecuting federal crimes, it is perplexing that Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice did not intervene in the prosecution of Donald Trump.
To
The
reclaim their
DOJ's election year
jurisdiction.
sensitivity policy is designed to protect the public from being influenced by legal proceedings during an election year. Had the DOJ zealously represented the United States by intervening to protect its own jurisdiction and that of the FEC, this issue might not be the predominant one of the 2024 presidential cycle. A disclosure on May 31st in unredacted FEC documents reveals that the Department of Justice conducted a year-long investigation and found no criminal acts committed by former President Trump. This revelation underscores the problematic
Would have been
nature of
good
Bragg's
testimony.
prosecution and his intrusion upon federal jurisdiction. Again, the implications for allowing local district attorneys to prosecute based on their interpretations of federal campaign finance law are profound. Such actions risk eroding the uniformity and predictability that FECA aims to provide. For me, a larger First Amendment concern is at play here. That is the deterrent that this encroachment on federal jurisdiction will have on well-qualified candidates from seeking public office. Fearing disparate legal standards based upon their locality, preserving the centralized enforcement mechanism envisioned in FECA is essential to a fair and impartial oversight of campaign finance regulations and of our elections. Alvin Bragg's misguided prosecution of former President Donald Trump represents a clear usurpation of federal jurisdiction. Coupled with the DOJ's inaction, it's compounded the issue. The dangerous precedent of local prosecutorial overreach in matters of federal concern must be addressed to maintain the integrity of our electoral system. We must reaffirm the exclusive authority of the FEC and the Department of Justice to enforce federal campaign finance laws, ensuring consistent and impartial application across the United States. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, good stuff. So the idea being that different agencies elbow each other to maintain their jurisdiction. You've seen in the movies, local cops show up to the crime scene. They're like, I hope those feds don't show up. Then the feds show up. They're like, it's our jurisdiction now. And Bruce Willis is like, over my dead body it is. And, you know, that thing kind of happens. So what they have done is sent over Biden's number 3, Matthew Colangelo, from the DOJ, which will make enforcement decisions at the federal level. His number 3 goes over to Colangelo's, resurrects the Alvin Bragg case using the federal theory that he couldn't have brought in the federal courts because he probably wouldn't have been able to get it past a federal judge or to obtain a federal conviction. So we're going to be here continuing to cover this, my friends. Would love it if you liked this video. If you enjoyed it, a subscribe would be even better. We'd really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend or family member so that they could also see what's happening in our government around us. We got other great segments coming up. We're going to send you over to this video, which you're going to love even more than this one. And we can't wait to see you over there.